Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AmeChibi 2015 figure collecting panel, a beginner's guide to collecting PVC figures and other related crap. So we'll go through and introduce ourselves individually in a second, but I just want to say my name's Cam. I'm joined by Vicky and Ebby, and yeah, we're basically just going to go through some basics with you. You know, how to get hold of the figures you want, and how to kind of use the aftermarket to its best possible power, and how to avoid bootlegs because they suck. So without further ado, let's. I've already gone through everything that we were actually going to do. How do I move on from this now? Oh, come on. This is supposed to be simple. Next slide. There we go. Right. So yeah, these are the topics that we're going to be going through. So online shopping guide. I keep knocking that. Online shopping guide. Like I said, we're going to be talking about the aftermarket and bootlegs. We're also going to be talking about some basic figure care as well. So how best to look after your figures once they're in your room or your house or whatever. Right. Are you going to behave now? Yes! Right, we're actually going to talk about ourselves a little bit. Vicky, if you want to come up and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Vicky. I've been collecting for about 2 years now. When I first started out, I was looking for anime merchandise online. I came across some figures on eBay and I noticed a huge disparity in price, and so I've done a bit of research, and this is where I first found out about the existence of bootlegs. Which Cam is going to talk about a bit later, why they're bad. But just one thing to say, it is so easy when you're starting out to fall into the trap of buying bootleg figures without realising it. So it's one of the pitfalls, but once you know how to spot them, then you can sort of avoid that. Just a couple of pictures of my collection. Here's some of my favourite boys here. I love collecting pretty boy figures. I do have a few female figures, but I'm sort of about 75% male figures. And also, this is my rather obsessed with a little anime called Free. These are my free chibi figures. Most of these are actually prize figures, so they're so you get them through lottery where they sell tickets and you win sort of prizes. And I was just sort of addicted to how very cute they are. So most of my collection is scale figures or sort of chibi trading figures. I do own a few Nendroids and a few Figma as well. So that's sort of a bit about me.
It's you next.
Oh, is it me next?
Yes, you have to talk now.
Oh no.
If you press right, it should take you on to the next one.
Uh-huh. Got it.
No.
Okay.
Hey!
Oh my god. Okay. Hi, I'm Ebby, otherwise known as Bizarre Jelly 5. I started collecting figures about 1.5 years ago, so what I'm going to talk you through today is the aftermarket and how various factors can influence a figure's price after it's been released. As you can tell, I'm also very similar to Vicky, and I like my boys, okay? So I mainly collect scale figures, and basically I'm going to be talking about the aftermarket with you, and that's all I have to say for now.
Me again. Okay, so my name's Cam, and you're probably all sick of me already. I'm also known as Tensei Twister. I do a YouTube channel where I talk about figures and review them and stuff in very stupid ways. I got into collecting figures a few years back. Started in college, buying a few things here and there with money that I probably shouldn't have been spending on figures. And it's kind of gone a bit out of control. I have more figures now than I know what to possibly do with. And I've recently combined collections with my partner Emily as well, who's filming this right now. So she collects Nendoroids, I collect Figmas and scale figures, and they're slowly pushing us out of our home. So yeah, I'm going to be talking to you guys about bootlegs. One of the videos that I did very recently on my channel was quite a lengthy kind of talk on bootlegs and about why they exist and why they're so damaging to the industry. I'm not really going to go into a lot of detail about that because we don't have time, and I'm sure you guys will get bored of me ranting angrily for 3 hours. So I'm just going to go into like the very basic stuff and just give you some general pointers on how to avoid them. And that is me. So let's move on. Now that I've actually got a bit of a grip of this PowerPoint presentation now. So we're going to start off with the online shopping guide. So Vicky's going to take you through that stuff now.
Okay, what I'm going to talk about here is proxy buying. So for things like standard releases, you can go to online websites like AmeChibi, Big in Japan, Hobby Search, places like that, and you can get them to ship the figures to you very easily. You can pre-order things on there. But for things like exclusive figures, which are only released on shops that only ship within Japan, or for things like prize figures, which is like this lottery I talked about before, where they sell tickets in Japan but you can't buy them outside of Japan, then Yahoo Japan Auctions is an excellent resource for buying these type of figures. But the problem is, of course, they also don't ship outside Japan. So what I'm going to talk about is proxy services, shopping services and forwarding services, which are ways to get your hands on these figures. Oh no. So, where am I?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, yeah, that's where I need to be. Just like I've said before, proxy services are required for shops that don't ship outside Japan. For instance, Yahoo Auctions or the gift store. You have what's called a proxy service, which you can use for bidding on online auctions. And there's also shopping services, which are for stores that sell items but don't ship outside Japan. There are also some proxies that will go to events like OneFest, where sometimes they have exclusive items, and they'll pick up those for you. Does tend to get very expensive because you're talking about someone taking time out their day to go and buy the item for you, and the queues of those things for exclusives can be huge, but it is possible. So here I've just listed a few proxy services. There's From Japan, Big in Japan, and a few others. Mostly these are either services I've used myself or that I found through a site called myfigurecollection.net, which we'll probably talk about a lot. It's a database which has things like lists of figures and shops, and it's really useful for searching for things that you want and finding information. I think I put a star next to that because it can be quite expensive compared to some of the others. But it is there as an option. Just a few shopping services there. So Big in Japan, also From Japan, which I'm going to use as an example. Okay, so Yahoo Auctions is an excellent resource for finding older figures or exclusives, or for finding prize figures, which is mostly what I use it for. It can soak up a lot of your money. It has a huge range of interesting stuff there. So I'm just going to take you through a guide of how you would buy something from Yahoo Auctions. I'm using the proxy From Japan as an example, but that is just one example of many. I'm using it as an example because it's very user-friendly and easy to use, and I've used it myself a lot. But there are other services that might not be the cheapest out there, but you can sort of... So the first step that I normally do is identify the item you want to buy. And normally what I'd do is I'd go over to myfigurecollection.net and search for the item name in English. So there, I've identified the listing on myfigurecollection.net for this, which is a prize figure. And what I do is, if you click on the name of the figure, then it will bring up the Japanese translation of the figure name. So you can take that and copy and paste that. And once you've copy-pasted that, I go over to it's yahoo.co.jp and click on the auction, and then type the sort of copy-paste the Japanese name of the figure you want to search for into the search bar. And it will bring up the listings. So if you go and click on one, here we have, it has a starting auction price which has the hammer next to it. Below that there's also a buy it now price which is represented by the little shopping cart. We also have the current number of bids on the item. And if you scroll down a bit more, you'll see the start time and end time, which goes is in the American format, so it goes month and then day and then the time. So then I go over to fromjapan.co.jp, and the first thing you will need to do is add a deposit, so you make sure you have enough money in your account to pay for the auction. They actually require you to have the amount you want to bid plus 200 yen. The 200 yen is a fee. So you can add your deposit either using a credit card or using PayPal. And then if you go to if you then go to place a bid on the item, and the URL from the Yahoo Japan auctions, if you copy paste that. So there's a space here which says type in the URL or the auction ID, and then you go along to place a bid. And it will bring up this page which gives you the option of how many you want to buy and then your maximum bid. If it has a buy it now price, you can bid the buy it now price and it will automatically buy it now for you. The maximum bid you can place is your deposit minus that 200 yen. And you have a choice of either placing bids in real time or doing a sniper bid. If you sniper bid, it will automatically bid in the last 5 minutes of the auction to try and keep the price down for you. So if you scroll down a bit, you'll see the options. You can choose between having a safer or cheaper shipping option for your domestic shipping. You can choose to have it sent to you in the exact packaging it was sent from Yahoo auctions in. I'd normally uncheck that. Also, if you have an expensive item you're buying, like a scale figure, you might want to ask it to do the item check service, which is 150 yen, and they'll check the item's all okay for you. And lastly, you just need to agree with that terms and conditions, and then you'll register their bid. So once you've won the auction, they'll send you an invoice for your charge one payment, which is the winning price plus the 200 yen commission fee plus a 5% system fee charge. And you go through and you pay for that. And then you wait until the item arrives for you. So for your charge one payment, again, you can either choose to pay credit card, PayPal, or you can use your deposit if you have sufficient in there. If you don't use your deposit within, I think it's like a week, they will refund that to you, so you can place a deposit and then pay with a card, and they'll refund your deposit to you. And then you make your payment and then wait for your item to arrive. They will also send you an email asking to instruct your shipping method. So this is for your international shipping. You can choose, if it's below a certain amount, I think it's about 6,000 yen, you can choose either sell small packet or EMS. The difference being EMS is insured and is a quicker service. There is also a difference on how it will then be handled on the other end. So a small packet will be handled by Royal Mail, and the EMS will be handled by Postal Force. I would usually opt for the small packet, unless it's an expensive item and you want that insurance. Once your item has arrived, they'll send you an invoice for the charge to payment. And this is your domestic shipping, any transfer fees, and then your international shipping, which will depend on what you've asked for. EMS tends to be more expensive because it's the more efficient method. And then a 5% system fee charge. And just quickly, there are a couple of things that they won't allow you to buy. Most proxy services won't let you buy anything pornographic.
Damn!
And anything that can't be shipped outside Japan. Use your common sense, go on Revenue and Customs and check what you can't import. But they also have a list on there that's fairly extensive of what you can't ship. I mean, things like perfume or flammable materials. But just use your common sense, really. And the last point is, Yahoo Japan Auctions is very much like eBay. It's individual sellers will list items, so it's really important to check the feedback. It's in the top right-hand corner. It will have a little sunshine and a little rain cloud, which show you how many positive and how many negative feedback the seller has. Actually, if you're using from Japan, it will also warn you if they've got more than a certain number of negative feedbacks. The other thing is, bootlegs are very rare on Yahoo auctions, but not totally unheard of. So just keep in mind to just be aware of that. And if you have any doubts, just ask your proxy questions, but just keep it to very simple English. Some of them are not very fluent in English. And very briefly, I'm going to talk about shopping services as well. So this is for your exclusive items that are only sold on websites that don't ship outside Japan.
Let's come onto the screen over here. You can do it that way.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Lost the cursor.
That's alright, it's gone over onto the monitor, that's why. There you go.
Okay. Okay, so again, your first step is look on somewhere like My Figure Collection and identify the item you want to buy. Some examples of stores that don't ship outside Japan. So I mentioned the gift store, they do lots of very nice plushies. Some other stores are Amazon.co.jp, sometimes has quite discounted figures. And then there are a few stores on Rakuten. Some of them do ship outside Japan, but others don't, so you might find an item you want to buy on there. So very much like the auction, you find your URL for the item you want to buy, and then just copy and paste the item description from the page. Tell them the quantity you want to buy, and then go continue. And the shopping service form is very much like the form for auction buying. So you have the option to have safer or cheaper shipping. You have the option to have a check service. Oh yes, and If some of your items are sold out, you have the option either to continue with the rest of the order or just ask them to contact you before going ahead. Forwarding services. So instead of getting a shop to buy it for you, sometimes there are stores that will let you buy the item yourself, have it shipped to them, and then they will forward it to you. The main advantage of this is it's somewhat cheaper than using a proxy because they don't charge you any fees or very low fees. The disadvantage being that it helps to have a grasp of basic Japanese because you're going to be ordering it yourself. So, for example, Big in Japan is one of the cheapest ways of doing this. They charge you 500 yen for a ticket plus their international shipping fees. So you order your item and they have it shipped to their address. So you fill in with your name but their address, and then you go to their site and just purchase a forwarding ticket and let them know that you've bought something, and then when your item arrives they'll send you an invoice for the international shipping. The problem is this is just a bit more tricky to do than having a proxy do everything for you. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about in this section is importing items into the UK. So, unfortunately, one thing we have to worry about as figure collectors is customs fees, which no one likes paying, but... so, the taxable threshold for goods ordered into the UK is £15. If the item goes above that price, you'll be taxed on it, and they'll also tax you on the shipping. So VAT is set at 20% of the item's price, and then there is also a handling fee depending on which service you're using. So Royal Mail will charge you £8, and then it's another reason to go for SAL rather than EMS is that Parcel Force will charge you £13.50. And I've just added some little Excel code in the bottom there of how you can calculate your import fees. The other thing is, if you're purchasing from a UK or a European store, then when you're importing, you won't have to pay any import tax. But normally, if it's a Japanese release, that will already have been figured into the price. So if you go down into the dealer's room and they're selling figures in there, they'll probably have a higher price tag than what you get from a Japanese site. But that will be because the cost of importing will already have been figured into the price. So it's sort of up to you to work out for yourselves where it's going to be cheaper from. The other thing is, if the shop is also selling European releases, then they shouldn't have to pay any import duty on that. So if they then marked up the price, then that's a bit cheeky. So you should just be aware of that as well. Okay, and I think we're...
Before we move on, does anyone have any questions for Vicky at this point in regards to this section? Because we're going to be banging through a lot of stuff. So it might be good if you've got anything to ask now, do it before you forget.
Yeah.
With being in Japan, I pre-ordered some stuff with them, and I've heard nothing since. They usually let you know when you get them, or?
If you've pre-ordered something, they should usually send you an email to confirm you pre-ordered it, and it should normally show in your account history. Then usually you only hear back from them when it's actually released, then you'll get an invoice. It's a very useful site, but they're known for not being very communicative. So if you ask them questions, I know sometimes they can take a while to respond. Anything else?
Sorry, possibly a silly question. On the Yahoo auction site, you said it was the American date and time. For the actual time of the auction, is that also American time, as it were? Or which time?
No. It's Japanese time. The format of the date is in the American way. So yes. Anything else?
We good?
Yeah.
So like I mentioned before, I've been collecting for kind of a short amount of time, so I've realised that the aftermarket is a really valuable tool for me being able to buy figures that I wasn't able to pre-order because I just wasn't collecting figures at that time. So I thought it would be good to just let you know some of the things that I've learned, and maybe it will help you. So you have to think about a figure before you go to order it, because you need to realise how much it's going to cost, and that depends on entirely the figure itself, and it depends on things like the popularity of the franchise or the particular character that you want a figure of, the reputation and the quality of the manufacturers. So if they make really good figures as standard, they tend to cost more in the aftermarket. How the figure turned out after release, just if it had a lot of production errors or QC issues or something, it will probably go down in price. And if the figure was an exclusive, so if it was an exclusive for One Fest or for Anime Girls Festival, those things are going to run you a lot of money. If the figure was made to order and if it was a limited run. So really, really simple stuff. So the first place that I'm going to tell you about is Mandarake, which is where I do most of my shopping because of all these reasons. They're really, really cheap and really reasonable. They never seem to overprice figures too much. Like, obviously they'll make a little bit of a profit on it, but I never feel like I'm being ripped off when I'm buying from them. I've noticed that their postage is quite reasonable as well. I've ordered from places like AmeChibi, and I just feel like they charge maybe too much for the postage that they provide. Since Mandarake are actually a store in Japan, they're a storefront that sell pre-owned and used merchandise, you can assume that they are going to be really trustworthy because they have this brand name attached to them. And they have a really big range. You can buy pretty much anything you could think of from Mandarake. Not like you're supposed to buy doujins, but you can get doujins from there. You can get figures, light novels, phone charms, anything that you can think of to do with a franchise that you like, they will probably have it. With Mandarake, when you order from them, they kind of lack in describing what the condition of a figure can be sometimes. I feel like they might have like a system with letters, but I don't ever feel like they've used it well. At least in places where I've been buying figures, so keep that in mind. If it seems really cheap, it's probably potentially damaged. If you compare it to other figures that are exactly the same, but it's 500 yen instead of 2,000 yen, it's probably damaged in some way. And another thing is that if you buy less than 5,000 yen's worth of merchandise from them, they will automatically put on 500 yen handling fee. So to get rid of that handling fee, you have to buy about 30 to 40 pounds worth of stuff. And that's pretty much Mandarake. The next one is AmeChibi pre-owned. So AmeChibi have a section on their website which is just pre-owned things that they have got in stock for whatever reason. The good thing about AmeChibi is that they're a trusted retailer. A lot of people use them for pre-ordering things a lot of the time. I think everyone I know who collects things uses AmeChibi, so they're a trusted retailer. You can combine items from the pre-owned store with things that you already have ordered. So if you see something go up at the beginning of March and you want to save on shipping, you can just combine it into an order that you might have for later in March, which is a good way to save on shipping and just save you a little bit of money. And the way that they list the condition of the item is just really clear and really concise, because it goes in an A, B, C. There's another one below. I think it's a U.
Yeah, there's one which is rubbish.
If there's anything in condition, you probably don't buy it. It's not going to be worth your time. It will be cheap, but it's going to take a lot of fixing up. So A is in really good condition, B is passable, C means that it's probably got some scratch marks on it, maybe got some paint transfer or whatever, and then U, I wouldn't recommend personally. They can be more expensive than sites like Mandarake though, because Mandarake just undercut them by quite a margin sometimes, and the search system is absolutely god-awful. Basically, you can search by set figure makers or a set product line or a set series. It doesn't mean every series ever. It means things that are popular like Vocaloid, Black Rock Shooter. You can't really search outside of it other than that, so it means a lot of scrolling. But other than that, it's alright. And the last one that I'm going to talk about in great detail is my figure collection, which is something that we're obviously going to be talking about a fair amount still. My figure collection is a good place to go and look to get an idea of an aftermarket price anyway. If you look for a figure and look in the comments of that particular page, a lot of people will say, oh, this figure's on Mandarake for 6,000 yen, or this figure's on AmeChibi pre-owned for 5,000 yen or whatever. So you kind of get a good idea of what the figure will cost from what people have said when they've posted listings there. But you can buy directly from people on my figure collection, so there are other collectors who just want to get rid of a few things. So I would recommend this as a last resort, personally, because a lot of the people on there know what figures are worth and know how much they can get for them personally, and a lot of people will try to overcharge for them if they can. But sometimes a lot of people clear out their collections. They decide that they don't want to do figure collecting anymore, so they just sell things at ridiculously cheap prices, and it's worth looking on there just to see if anyone is getting rid of something that you would really like to own for a reasonable price. Yeah, I've already covered that. If any of the buyers ask you to send a payment through PayPal as a gift, don't do that. When you send it as a business transaction rather than a gift, it means that basically you're covered if the figure turns out to be damaged or broken or a bootleg. If you send it as a gift, it basically has no protection for you whatsoever. So if you send it as a gift, it turns out to be a bootleg, you can't get your money back. But if you send it as a business transaction and it turns out to be a bootleg, you can get your money back, and PayPal will usually side with you if you can provide proof. And that's pretty much that, I think. And there are other sites that I haven't used, but I have heard people do use them, such as Rakuten and eBay, which we'll talk about later. And also, if you have a ton of money that you want to spend, Forbidden Planet are there for you. Alright, now we're going to do a bit of a game. So, let's do the picture first. So we're going to be playing something a little bit like play your cards right with figures. So I'm going to give you the retail price of a figure, the maker, the year, and what the figure's of, and then hopefully people will join in and tell me if they think it went up in price or if it went down in price, and if you get it right, you get some Haribo. So.
Well worth it. Can I play?
No.
What if you get it wrong?
So we're going to start off with this.
Straight in.
Alright, this is the Luc Fonfabre figure from Tales of the Abyss. It's a 1:8 scale figure made by Altair in 2012. It retailed at 7,300 yen, which is £40. Everyone seems to think higher. I don't know how I'm going to do the Haribo distribution.
They've voiced up. They know already. We've taught them too well.
So everyone thinks higher.
Boom.
His aftermarket price was between 22,000 yen, which was quite a while ago, but he is getting a re-release, so his price has gone down to 12,000 yen, which is still expensive. The next one is Kagami Tiger from Kuroko no Basuke. This was a Mega House figure released in 2014. It's a 1:8 scale figure, and it retailed at 8,600 yen, which is £46. It's about basketball, and it's really good. You should watch it. Oh, everyone's so mixed.
Okay. Show of hands. Who says higher? Who says lower?
And it's pretty mixed.
He went down in price to 3,000 and 4,000 yen. And he's really good, so you should buy him.
So, sorry, if it was good, why did it go down?
If what?
If, like, the aftermarket price is based on, like, the quality of the model or that, the series of things, why would it go down if it was a good model?
Because it's a mega house figure.
That's basically the rule.
So that's basically it. If it's a mega house figure, it tends to go down in price.
Sometimes figure good quality, like Ultimate Bazooka went down immediately. She was a very good figure, but they made so many of her that there was quite a lot of supply, so she actually went down in price. I think she's starting to go up again
It's starting to go up again now because they've released, because there were a lot of QM issues with the first run. And since they've been sorted out, she's starting to climb back up again.
She went down to like 4,000.
Yeah, she went down to like nothing. It was
Oh my
amazing.
God.
Yeah.
Alright, so the next figure is from The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, and it is the Yuki Nagatone android made by Good Smile Company in 2008. Her retail price was 3,000 yen. Did she go up or down? Higher. Everyone's saying higher.
Lower. That makes
Away there, Abby. Boom.
She went down to between 750 yen and 1,200 yen because, as I understand it, she's an older Nendoroid, and therefore her hand joints and stuff aren't as good as the newer Nendoroids. I imagine that if this was a newer Nendoroid, she'd probably be about the same price. I don't feel like she would have gone up or down because I feel like they might have produced a lot of us. So. Right, the next one is Levi from Shingeki no Kyojin, made by Pultra in 2014. This is a 1:7 scale figure with a retail price of 11,111 yen.
All the ones.
So, who thinks higher? Who thinks lower? He went down in price to 2,000 yen. This figure turned out to be absolutely awful and no one wanted him, no one was buying him, everyone was cancelling their pre-orders because his face doesn't look like Levi.
Can we get closer?
Was he?
I wish I had one, but I was stupid and I didn't do that, so I'm really sorry.
Where it basically looks completely big.
Yeah. That's the one. Right, the next one is Yoko Littner from Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann.
They're getting smart now.
Yeah, this is an exercise. So she's an altar figure from 2009, a 1:8 scale figure that retailed at 7,800 yen. Did she go higher or lower? Seems that everybody said higher, and she did go up to 30,000 yen. I'm assuming that's because it's a Gurren Lagann figure made by Alta of Yoko.
It's 15,000 yen for each boo.
Right, the next one is the Hurricane Anase Figma from Free. This was made by Max Factory in 2014. It looks like that, I would like to point out, and it retails at 4,500 yen. Did it go higher or lower? Got my eye on you. So, who thinks higher? Who thinks lower? Yeah. He went up in price to between 6,000 and 8,000 yen. I don't know why, because he's pretty bad. And I say that, and I love Haro.
We'll distribute Haribo at the end. Because everyone seems to be winning.
But it's more fun this way.
It is more fun this way.
Right, so Velvet Waver from Fate Zero, an Altair made in 2013, sorry. This was a 1:8 scale figure that retailed at 8,000 yen. Did it go higher or lower? Lower? Okay. Everybody knows now, he went down in price to between 4,000 and 5,000 yen because it's Waver, and apparently no one likes Waver, and that's sad.
Look at him. He knows. He knows.
The next one is Seto Kaiba from Yu-Gi-Oh! This is a Kotobukiya figure, released in 2012 and then again in 2014. It's a 1:7 scale figure that retailed at 7,800 yen. Did it go higher or lower? You're all wrong. He went down to about 45,000, 4,500 yen, but you can get him on AmeChibi right now for 4,150 yen, brand new.
The clue in this one was because he had a re-release, that's why he got
Buy
named.
him and put it in a microwave and film it for YouTube.
Oh, he's so good though. Right, this is Yoshino from Data Live. This was released in 2014 by Good Smile Company. It's an Android and it retailed at specifically 3,889 yen. Did she go up or down?
Like the headlines.
She went up to 14,000 yen. She started going back down in price because she is getting a re-release sometime this year. So if you want her, you should go and pre-order her. Right, this is the last one.
Lore.
This is the Link Real Action Heroes figure from Medicom. It's a doll, sorry. And he retailed at 19,800 yen. Did he go up or down in price? That's so mixed. Right, who thinks higher? Who thinks lower? He went down to 12,000 to 14,000 yen-ish.
He looks like he's made out of Play-Doh.
He's really good. I don't have him, but I promise you he's good.
You're just saying that because it's Link?
Yes, it is. So now we're going to move on to the bootlegs with Mr. Tensei Twister. So thank you very much.
Yo, right, how are we doing for time actually? Oh, doing really well for time, that's surprising. Right, yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I've done a lot of research on bootlegs and stuff like that. I produced a video late last year with some detailed information on like what they are and why they're so damaging to the industry for both you and the people who make the legitimate figures. But I'm going to go into that a little bit, but this is more just a basic guide on how to spot and avoid them both in real life and on the internet. Fortunately, events like this, you are very, very, very unlikely to find them because AmeChibi is good. This is good. But yeah, I've never ever seen a bootleg at a convention like this that's got pre-registrations and stuff like that. I assume because there are less dealers at the dealer room, it's easier to control. If you go to an event like Expo, unfortunately, Expo is a really, really good event, and I don't mean to say anything bad about them at all, but they are teeming with bootlegs, because unfortunately those kind of events are a really easy platform for people to take advantage of. I did another video as well where I went to London Expo in October of last year as well, and there's just so much there, and there are some detailed examples there. So if you, after this, if you want to learn more, go to YouTube, just search how to spot bootlegs, like bootleg anime figures, something like that. It should come up fairly close to the top. Humble brag. Right, so very basic description of what bootlegs are. They are basically cheap imitations of legitimate products that are designed to basically abuse the popularity of a certain character or franchise. So Good Smile makes a really, really nice figure, and Jimmy Triad down the road goes, oh, you know what? I'm going to make a really, really crap copy of that and sell it for half the price because people will buy it because people are dumb. However, you're not dumb. Well, at least you won't be after this. So, yeah, the major problems involving with this is the figures are, more often than not, absolute crap. Even if they look good on the surface, they will more than likely fall apart in no time flat. The paint will transfer easier than anything else. They'll have massive amounts of leaning problems. They won't hold their form very well. The paint jobs are generally rubbish. And going in a bit further, they're very exploitative both to yourself, by trying to trick you into thinking it's a genuine article, and because the majority of these things are produced in China as well, and without going too deep into that, some areas of China do have very shady conditions, like working conditions, for the people who make these things, unfortunately. Very low pay, very poor working condition, stuff like that. And the analogy that I came up with there is just think pirated films. So back in 1990s, you could go to a market, buy a film for a couple of quid. You could watch that film, but you probably wouldn't get much out of it because it'd be grainy and be all rubbish. The sound quality would be terrible. And these things sound rubbish.
And they're normally made of poison.
They are, yes. In fact, some bootleg figures have known to be actually poisonous because they use lead-based paints. So that's another reason why you should avoid them. Yeah, so why should you avoid bootlegs? Well, that kind of explains it all right there. Straight up. I was gonna say, I don't know what you're talking about. Misa looks like that anyway. But yeah, anyway, this is going to probably sound a bit counterintuitive, but bootlegs, buying a legitimate figure over a bootleg is actually value for money, because even though you can buy a bootleg figure for sometimes half the price or less, once you've purchased that figure, it's worth nothing. It's literally worth bugger all. The only way that you can make any money out of it, be it less, the same or more, is by doing the exact same thing that the person who sold it to you did, which is duping someone else. So that goes into my second point, which is resale value. If you buy a legitimate figure, you will be able to sell that on either at a hefty percentage of what you paid for it, the same price, or if not more. So you know, they're a good investment as well, if you know that you're going to be buying figures in and then selling them on later on. Another thing as well is, if you buy a legitimate figure, you will generally get after-sales service because they're reputable companies that hold customer service in high regard. So say, for example, if you buy a Figma off of Good Smile and it's missing a leg, well not a leg, but missing an accessory or a joint is broken out of the box, something like that, you can go to Good Smile and they'll just be like, yeah, wicked, we'll send you a new one, or we'll sort it out for you one way or the other. If you buy a bootleg, once that thing is in your hands, the seller won't want anything to do with you. And you can't go to the legitimate retailers because they will just turn around and say, well, you've not bought our product, this isn't our product, so we're not going to help you, unfortunately. And then, like I said in the slide there, they're crap, look at that! There are some bootleg figures that exist that are, you know, to a point, quite good. When you're kind of getting into that range though, you're looking more at customised recasts and garage kits and things like that, which is something I'm not really going to get into here because it's a big grey area that I personally have avoided, because I don't really want to get into it. So, moving on, I'm going to give you some tips now on how to spot bootlegs at face value. The biggest giveaway, generally, more often than not, is the box. So that's what I'm going to focus on the most. Bootleggers will generally take less effort with their boxes to replicate the original packaging. They'll be of lesser quality, and in some cases the designs will be completely different. So one of the reasons why Good Smile and other companies will make quite intricate box designs, for someone like me, I look at that and go, well, that's a bit pointless, because why have they made so much effort into that box when they should have put the effort into the figure, which is quite apparent with the Ultimate Madoka, but we won't go into that. The reason why they do that is because the more intricate they make the box, the harder it is for them to copy, which results in lazy bootleggers going, oh, we'll just stick a clear sheet in the front, that'll be fine. So if you have a knowledge of what the box looks like, that's a good way to start. Generally, they'll be poorly packaged within the box as well, so I'll get into that in more detail in a second with my biggest tip. A lot of reputable companies as well will add seals of authenticity onto their boxes, so companies like Mega House, Good Smile, Alta, Bandai, they'll put symbols of authenticity, which are like the little holographic logos that you see on a lot of stuff these days. And so if you know a figure's supposed to have one, and it doesn't, well, you should be thinking about that. And then the big thing is, does it even have a box? So if someone's trying to sell a figure to you and it's not even in packaging, that should be ringing an alarm bell straight away. Why doesn't it have a package? Maybe it's pre-owned, fair enough, but if they're saying it's new, then, well, what is it? Is it a prize figure, or does it just not have a box? Because the box was crap. So, there we go. So that's that basic stuff. The biggest tip involving the box is a little thing that I like to call the shake of judgment. So literally, if you can get a box of a figure in your hands, give it a bit of a shake. Don't, like, you know, don't frigging guitar smash it into the floor. Just give it a bit of a rattle. Because generally bootleg figures will be packaged really poorly. They'll use the minimum amount of materials possible. So it may rattle a bit when you move it around in the box. Other people who produce legitimate figures will package these things meticulously because they know that they're supposed to be shipped, maybe even overseas, so they want to make sure it's safe and secure in the box that you bought from them. Bootleggers don't give a crap about that. They just want to get it in the box and sell it to you. So if it rattles, be on your guard. Now, these are my favourite friends. This little company called Zinzida, they're not even really a company, I don't think. Basically, if you see anything with Zinzida on the box, it's a bootleg, don't buy it. Don't buy it, ever. These things are always 100% bootlegs. These guys, what they do is they bootleg figures, put it in their little crappy box design, slam their logo on it to make it look more legitimate, and then try and sell it off at ridiculously cheap prices. I mean, I'll get into price in a second, but this is the original Sakura Miku Nendoroid. They're palming this off for 20 quid. Nendoroids aren't worth 20 quid, they're worth way more than that in paint. So yeah, another thing that Zinzida do as well, which you may have seen if you go to places like Expo and stuff like that, they do a lot of League of Legends chibi figures as well. They're all fake too. Yeah, and they're everywhere, like especially at Expo. They are absolutely everywhere. Just steer clear of these things for the love of God. Okay, so moving on from the box, let's talk about the figure itself. So it's kind of difficult to see on the screen, but I'll point out in a second. The paint job is the first thing you should be looking at. And things like the finer details, so say for example the hair, if they're holding like little bitty things, they've got like little details on their clothing or little kind of stuff that comes off. Things like that. Accessories are a good one. If accessories are badly painted, that's another warning sign. The way that bootlegs are generally made is with either stolen moulds or old discarded moulds that have been used by the original retailer, or they'll just recast full figures. And what happens when they do that? Older moulds and recasted moulds will generally produce what are called errors, which is through a build-up of the materials being used on the actual like, metal, and as it heats up, it distorts and things like that. So you get what are called moulding errors. So like this little, you get these like creases on the figure there. If it's coming out of the box like that, then that is dodgy as hell. So that's another thing that you can look out for. These are generally easier if they've got past stage 1 of the box and you can actually see the figure itself. Get a good close look in there. Moulding errors are generally the biggest giveaway because legitimate figure distributors are meticulous about this sort of stuff. And it's one of the reasons why figures cost so much, because they just reuse, well they don't reuse, but they replace moulds like nobody's business, and those things are expensive. And then tip 3, like I mentioned earlier, have a look at the price. It's always good to have an understanding of how much things cost. So like I say, Nendoroids, for example, usually retail in the UK at about 40 quid, depending on what the thing is. And so if you inherently know how much a figure is going to cost, that's automatically going to defend you from someone who's saying, this figure, yeah, it's brand new, it's a Nendoroid, came out last week, £5. You need to, exactly, you need to be asking yourself the question, why is this so cheap? If you can legitimately answer this question, then yeah, maybe it is legit. But it's a case of just kind of being aware of how much things are going to cost. I mean, generally, bootleggers are a bit crafty about how they price their goods, but they will always try to undercut the legit ones to get you to buy their thing over the actual nice thing. And then the other thing as well I was going to mention is haggling. This doesn't happen as much anymore, but it is something that I have known to happen in the past. People who stock legitimate figures will have a very small markup, so we're talking a few pounds per figure. Like was mentioned earlier, you've got things like import duty and shipping and all that kind of stuff. That's all factored within the price. People who deal in legitimate figures may be able to haggle with you, but like I say, you're not going to get much more than a few quid out of them. Maybe a £5 if they really like you. However, when it comes to a bootleg figure, the markup is insane. Like some bootleg figures, I've seen some of like the wholesale sites, you can buy like a bootleg figure for 20p a pop. And then they'll get them in an event and sell them at 20 quid. That's a lot of money. But as a result, what they'll do is they've got a lot more power to haggle with you. So if you're umming and ahhing about a figure that's say 40 quid, and they turn around and go, you know what, I'll do that for you for a tenner. No. Just leave it. There's a shop where I live, and they sell a lot of bootleg stuff. And you went in there, because there was a Real Action Heroes White Rock shooter in there. How much was it? How much were they selling it for?
It was like 100 quid, something like that.
£100. They offered it to her for 70 quid. Just without batting an eyelid, just, yeah, I'll give it to you for 70 quid. And it was... I
think I just glanced at it and they're
yeah,
like,
you just left straight away. That was definitely a bootleg. But yeah, so knowledge of price, just being aware of how the people selling the things act as well is another good indicator. But yeah, like I say, those three things combined are generally going to give you an idea. But it's never, sometimes it can't be conclusive, but we'll get to that in a sec. And we've harped on about this enough, But I'm going to talk about something slightly different when it comes to my figure collection, which is, like, this is an extremely powerful resource for figure collectors anyway. But one of the really useful things about it is the people who frequent there will document bootlegs that they've found or they've purchased. So if you go onto a figures page, at the bottom of the main details, it'll come up with a little red thing saying counterfeit, and that means that counterfeits of that product are known to exist. You can click on that, and there's a little camera icon. You can go on there, it'll show you pictures of the figure itself, the box, and that'll give you some good reference points. So if you're going to an event or you're cracking at the internet with a figure in mind, you can use this and kind of prepare yourself and go, right, well, I know that bootlegs of this exist, the boxes look like this, there's this thing that's quite distinctive, I'll keep an eye out for that. But this thing is far from exhaustive. I found some bootlegs at Expo which weren't listed on this website, so you can't call this as gospel. Okay, moving on to shopping online, obviously you've got a lot less ammunition with this one. It's going to be a lot more, it's a lot more nebulous, because they're, the pictures aren't necessarily of even the figure they're looking to sell, and all you've really got to look at is the location where the figure's coming from and the price. Be cautious of China. Never rule out China, but always be cautious of China, because that's where the things are manufactured, and that's, they're going to be able to get them to you cheaper from there. And yeah, so generally what I recommend is shopping from trustworthy sites, like have been mentioned before, or from communities with countermeasures in place. So my figure collection is really good for naming and shaming known people who sell bootlegs. Unfortunately, if you get stung once by the person who's done it for the first time, they will try and help you, but there's not really much they can do, but at least they have something in place to stop repeat offenders. Another thing is, as well, I'm terrible for this, but when I sell stuff on eBay, I'm really lazy, and I'll more than happily just go on Google, find a stock image of what I'm selling, and just whack it on there. And if someone asks for an actual photo of the product, sure, I'll go ahead and do it. So, like I say though, if the image is of a stock photo, don't rule it out straight away, because they might just be a lazy bugger like me. But always ask for pictures of the actual product. More often than not, they will give you them, and if they don't, then steer away, because it probably looks completely different. And then, like was mentioned before, use PayPal where possible, because PayPal have this little thing called buyer protection, which Ebby touched on earlier, which basically means if you do the transaction as an actual transaction rather than as a gift, PayPal have things in place to protect you if the item you get isn't up to snuff. Expanding on that, there's this little thing that you need to kind of look up, which is called consumer contracts regulations. This is what replaced distance selling regulation in the summer of last year. Basically, that is to protect you while you're buying stuff online. Because obviously you don't have that face-to-face interaction with the product before you buy it. To cut a long story short, if you buy something online, you have until 14 days after you receive the item to change your mind. And if you change your mind, you can send it back, no questions asked, they have to refund you. As long as you haven't opened the item, it's fine. So it's a little bit more complicated than that, but if you're going to be buying stuff online, maybe look that up, just give it an idea. Generally, that only really works if you're buying from in the same country, but there are interactions with other countries as well. So, like I say, it's a bit detailed, but it might be worth just having a quick glance at it. And then this is a more general thing, but what I like to say is just try to have the right attitude when it comes to collecting figures. Unfortunately, I know quite a few people who buy these things just for the sake of having them. So, my mate is a fan of, I don't know, of all the anime in the world, I can't think of one off the top of my head. Sword Art Online. My mate likes Sword Art Online. But you know what? I like Sword Art Online more, and there's a figure there. And if I buy that figure, my mate doesn't have that figure, that means I'm a better Sword Art Online fan. And Wicked, it's only a £5. Who cares if his face is half come off? I'm going to buy that, because I'm a better Sword Art Online fan than my friend. Don't do that. That's not right. That's not the right sort of attitude to have as an anime fan, let alone as a figure collector. And moving into that, just kind of think about quality over quantity. It doesn't matter how many figures you have if they're all pants. You want a good figure that you can look at and go, yeah, that was amazing. This is really good. It was well worth the money that I paid for it. And not just have like this army of mutants staring at you. You can hear the whispers, kill me. Lisa Romano's there at the bottom with a crazy face from earlier. I couldn't look at that and feel happy. So, you know, what is the point? Another thing, just be patient. Yep. One of the pitfall traps that people do fall into when buying bootlegs is, well, this figure's out of print, so I'm not going to be able to get hold of it, but there are bootlegs available, so I'll just buy that. No, there are things in place, like Abby talked about the aftermarket. There are things like my figure collection, you can set up a wish list, so if someone puts up an item that you want, it'll email you saying, hey, this guy's selling this item. It may, you know, they may be scalping you for 500 quid, but you know what, if you want it. No, my figure collection is usually quite good. And there are things as well like Fig in Stock. That website keeps an eye on all the shops. So if you put in something that you want, it'll tell you when something's available as well. So just exercise some patience and restraint, and you will find a legitimate version of the product you want, and feel so much happier for it, as long as you have the right attitude. And then you deserve better than this. Just as a consumer, be a knob. Just look at figures and, you know, be really meticulous about what you want and what you don't want. I'll buy a 30,000 yen figure from the internet. I'll still nitpick at it and say, well, I don't like this and I don't like that. That's a good attitude to have, because that means you won't settle for less. If you have the attitude that you deserve better than this, you're not going to settle for a crappy bootleg. You're going to settle for something really good. You're always going to push for something better. So, you know, why not? At the end of the day, you're the consumer. It's your money. They should earn it. And more often than not, they do. And then just overall tip, if in doubt, don't shell out. If you are, at the end of all the checks, all the tips that I've given you, if by the end of it you're still unsure, just leave it and look for something else that you can be sure of. You're either going to find the figure that you wanted, and it's going to be the genuine deal, and you 100% know that it's the genuine deal, or you're going to find something else that is also the genuine deal, but you know what, you're happier with that because you know that it's good, it's legit. So there you go. Bootleg's terrible. Any questions about bootlegs before I carry on? You in the back there.
Hi, on Amazon, I don't know if they're legit or not. You seem to find a lot of like Sonico, the prize figures or something, and they're usually between about like 18 to 30 pounds.
Right.
Would they usually be bootleg, or they just usually are around that price?
Prize figures are generally cheaper than, say, full-blown, like actual like releases, retail releases. I mean, 18 to 30 pounds. I mean, people do kind of sell them at that sort of price second hand. I mean, Amazon are generally okay, but I have heard stories of.
Look at their feedback and stuff.
Yeah, it would be more a case of that. I mean, the price is sound. I mean, like I said, I'd probably just say use my figure collection.
Yeah.
Find the figure that you're looking at there and see what sort of price it's going for in the aftermarket. If it seems too good to be true, maybe contact the seller, ask some questions, some additional pictures. Just, you know, just kind of get your info in place before you make a decision.
Okay, thank you.
Two quick questions.
Okay. Just shout at me, come on.
My figure collection, is that a buyer's site, you just buy a set price, or is that an auction site or buy?
It's neither, really. The buying side of things, I wouldn't say it's an auction site, it's more like the bring and buy. So you set a price and people will contact you completely privately. My figure collection, more than anything else, is a database. So it's simply just a database that people have put together of pretty much every single figure or piece of merchandise that exists.
Number two, really, really useful slides, lots of great sites. Have you got a handout, or is there a website everyone here can go to maybe get the...
Yeah, I mean, you can search for the video. So I put loads of places that you can go to in that video. It's all listed in the description as well. I mean, the main places that I think we would endorse is Yahoo Auctions, Mandarake, and AmeChibi. Those are generally the three sites that we would say these guys are really good.
Thank you very much.
Cool. You in the back.
You do a box test and it passes the box test. How do you, if it's in a box, how do you check the quality of, like, say, the paint or the moulding? Because you've got that weird plastic stuff.
Yeah, generally a lot of figures will have the kind of translucent window that you can have a look through. I mean, really, that's going to be the best thing that you can do to have a good look at the figure. More often than not, especially if they're in smaller boxes, they're close enough that you can see the details through it. And if there are any glaring errors, they'll be apparent looking through that window. A lot of the examples that I found, generally you can tell just by looking at the box. I mean, one Nendoroid that I found is Saber. Her head wasn't attached to her body in the box, and you can clearly see that. So.
I bought a figure from a retailer who has been mentioned already as not being here, and when I bought it, it looked legitimate and everything, and then I got it home and took out the box and there was a massive seam down the back.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's,
like, you couldn't see
yeah,
the
you
back
can
in
see. I
the
mean,
box.
this is the thing. Like I say, these tips are all designed to help. They're not going to 100% protect yourself in every instance. And unfortunately, something like that, where all the problems are at the back, but you're not going to be able to see it. Yeah, that's something that's going to be quite difficult to avoid, I guess. I mean, did the box check out as well?
Yeah, it passed the box test, and to be fair, I did get in touch with the retailer, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, our bad."
Yeah, they are bad. Yeah, so yeah, like I say, yeah, there are sometimes they do get through, and it's awful, unfortunately. But yeah, it's one of those things. All of those tests will help, and they will get you through 90% of bootleg merchandise. But some are a bit craftier than others, and yeah, unfortunately, if you end up in that sort of situation, there are things that you can do, but more often than not, the retailers will just wash their hands of it, unfortunately. But like I say, it's just so in that sort of case, I would just say shop from people that you know are legit, like sellers, like people who turn up at these sorts of events, who also go to expos and stuff. I am really picky about who I shop with. So yeah, just try and build a rapport with people that you know, and just kind of try and keep that going. Like if you know someone sells legit, then just buy from them. Try not to venture outside. Hello.
A couple of questions, serious questions. Could you actually go into how it damages the industry? Because you didn't really talk about the more damaging aspects to it. And the other one is, this is going to be a daft question, but what's your opinion of the more out there bootlegs? I'm not going to fool anybody, but going like, the heck, the sort of like things you see in supermarkets where, oh, like look, it's Justice Force and there's like Batman and the Flash and America for some reason.
There's the sort of stuff that Ashens reviews on his channel. So the more industry side of things, the main point that I'll make when it comes to the industry side of things is just, if you buy a bootleg figure for 20 quid, that 20 quid isn't going to go to anything helpful anywhere. So it's going to, like I said, it's going to go to Bobby Triad in Hong Kong, and he's going to share it with all of his Triad mates, potentially. He's not going to give any of that money to the people who actually make the figures. They're going to get, a penny an hour, like that sort of thing. So you're supporting people who have dubious work ethics, who probably deal in other dubious things as well. Whereas if you buy a legitimate figure, that money goes back up the production line, so it goes to Good Smile. Good Smile then give that money to the people who hold the license for that figure, and then that money will then end up getting into the pocket of the people who actually make the thing that you love so much. So, say for example, Madoka Magica. So you've got the person who made Madoka Magica, or the people who made Madoka Magica, the studio that created that anime. They will like use their license, so people will purchase their license. They will then give it out to production companies who make the products, and then you will buy the products. So if you go like that, that money then goes back up the chain. It works in sort of the opposite direction, but basically, if people don't buy enough of the product, then the licensors will stop giving out their license to people. So eventually the figures are going to disappear. Like I say, I go into a lot more detail about that of the figure. If I stand here and ramble on about it, we're going to run out of time. We're getting towards the end now. We have more stuff to talk about. So I'll take one more question if there's one going. Yep.
Hi. So I got stung when I was a noob about 5 years ago.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Was it me, sir?
The worst thing is I actually paid like full retail price for it.
Yeah.
Got it home. It was a figure that I'd actually been really admiring for a while, so I got it back. I was like, well, take this crap. Box looks legit. It's got the pricing and everything. But the most obvious thing for me was firstly the material was like some kind of rubber.
Yeah.
And secondly, it was insanely heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could beat someone up with it.
You should go back and beat up the person who sold it to you.
I noticed that you didn't mention anything about weight, so I was wondering, is it that the bootleggers have become a bit more sophisticated?
I suppose weight is something that you could look into. I guess it's just difficult, especially in the case of like PVC scale figures. Yeah. The size is, because they're so small in comparison to say other things.
Yeah. This was the figure that was about.
Yeah, I mean they're going to be heavier. They're going to feel heavier as well because of the size of the box, because they're bigger and more cumbersome. They feel heavier. So it's one of those things that's hard to gauge, I suppose. But yes, if you've seen maybe two copies of the same figure, one from one store, one from the other, and you had a chance to feel them both. If one is excessively heavy or excessively lighter, then obviously that's going to draw one of them into question. But that is a good point actually. Weight is quite a good thing to talk about, because like rubber is going to be quite heavy. The paints as well, funnily enough, if they use a worse paint, that's probably going to be heavier as well. Like I mentioned lead-based paints before. Exactly, yeah, to try and make it look better.
Also, something I noticed, I grew up in Hong Kong, so I'm quite used to bootlegs. The smell is often a really good indicator.
Yeah.
If you open the box and it smells like a cesspit, close it and sort of burn it.
Burn it, yeah. And burn the person who tried to sell it to you. Yes, so there was one more thing that I was going to mention, but I've completely forgotten it. So let's move on to basic figure care. So we're going to get Vicky back to tell you about how to look after your legitimate figures once you've bought them and they're secure in your home.
Okay, this is going to be by no means exhaustive, but I just want to give some very basic tips on how you should look after them. You're going to be spending potentially a lot of money on them, so you want them to last a long time and stay looking good. So, just some very general tips. Keep them in a cool place. PVC can soften in the heat, so they can warp over time if they're kept somewhere too hot. The other thing is keep them out of direct sunlight, because pretty much like anything like that, the paintwork can fade over time if it's kept in bright sunlight. The other thing is paint transfers. So if you keep two figures too close together, the paint from one might transfer and leave a mark on the other. So just leave a little bit of space in your display between them. For cleaning them, I'd normally just dust them with a paintbrush. You can use a hairdryer, but keep it set to a cool setting. If there's very stubborn dirt, just a damp cloth with lukewarm water. You can use a little bit of washing up liquid, but never any sort of cleaning chemicals, because that will strip your paint right away. The other thing is, for very stubborn marks, like if it's got a paint transfer or a bit of dirt on it that you can't get off easily, you can use what's called a magic eraser. I got a Homura figure from Mandarake that had been marked down in price because it had a mark on it, and I used one of those magic erasers just to remove it, and it came up pretty much perfectly. For very, very stubborn things, you could use either a little bit of acetone or paint thinner on the end of cotton bud. I recommend, if you want to go for that, to be very, very careful. It will take the paint away, and you may have to end up sort of repairing the paint job if you do that. Basically, anything you do with it, I'd be just very gentle with them and sort of treat them with care. Now, stickiness, it's not something I've come across a lot. It's talked about on myfigurecollection.net. It tends to happen either in warmer climates, or if you buy a figure second hand and it's been kept sealed in the box and hasn't been let out at all, it can get quite sticky. So it's best to sort of leave them in a place where they can aerate. The reason for this is the PVC has like a plasticizer in it, which just makes the parts a bit more flexible. And over time, if it's not aired out or it's kept somewhere hot, this can migrate to the surface and leave sort of a sticky layer on it. So this method just comes from Koa-chan's blog. She's an employee of Good Smile Company, and she tried several methods, and what she suggests is basically soaking them in 10 parts water to 1 part washing up liquid to just take the sticky layer off, and then washing off with plain water at the end. Another option is to use a cream cleaner. Again, this is a very risky option and should only be used if it's very stubborn or very bad, because again it can strip away the paint. The other option is actually, if it gets sticky, is to put it in a freezer for like about an hour, and this can sort of cool it down and help deal with it often after you've cleaned it off. If you end up snapping off part of your figure or dropping it, which does happen from time to time, then it's usually more cost effective to repair it rather than trying to replace it. You want to keep your figure looking nice for the longest possible amount of time. For small breaks, you can just use a little bit of super glue, which is actually what's been used here to repair this staff that was broken off on this trading figure. The main disadvantage of this is it dries really quickly and it sticks to skin like anything. The other thing is if you use too much of it, it can leave a mark on the paintwork, so you need to be quite careful. And because it dries so quickly, you need to get it into position straight away, otherwise you end up stuck in the wrong position. For bigger breaks, you're probably better off using an epoxy type glue. This will make a stronger bond. If it's a really big break, it's like the figure snapped in half, you might want to reinforce where you're repairing it, so with sort of metal pinning it. But the epoxy glue will form a really strong bond. It usually comes in two parts that you have to mix together, and it's slower to dry, so you have more time to get the parts in the right position. And sometimes what you can do is just put a little bit of masking tape to hold it in the correct position while the glue dries. There are specific PVC glues which are used for repairing things like PVC piping. Usually those are not recommended for repairing figures because how they actually work is they slightly melt the PVC to form a stronger bond, which is normally not what you want on your figures because it can ruin the look of it. So it can damage the finish of the figure. If you have something that's a bit stubborn to pose, you don't want to force something into its stand. Something like a Figma or, say, an Android you're changing the face plates around, then a good tip is just to use a hairdryer on a hot heat for no more than about 10 seconds. It will slightly soften the PVC, so you can just, rather than forcing it in and risking it snapping, just ease it into the right position. I think
that's it, yeah.
That's it. If you have
anything, oh, go on,
anything else, any more questions? Couple at the back.
I really want to start getting into Android, but what puts me off is all the little parts. Do you have any tips for storing like the extra faces and the little bits that come
I normally keep the extra parts still in the box, so still in the blister pack. Some people use like resealable sandwich bags, and actually I think Figma come with them as well, so you can store your parts.
To keep them fresh, yeah. All my extra parts, I pop them in the Figma bag, and then pop the bag back in the box, because I keep all my boxes for resale value purposes.
And I know a lot of people like to keep like little drawer sets where they keep the separate faceplates in, so they don't have to fish out the boxes every time as well, and it's a good way to keep the parts organised.
The English representative of Good Smile Company, she recommends this storage tub that has sections in it that you can measure out yourself, and she uses that to divide all of her parts based on what Nandroid it belongs to, and you basically puncture holes into the lid of it as well, so it keeps the figures aired out, but it also separates them and it keeps them from having to go in and out of the box.
Queen and Molly runs trying
to get some nice drawer sets that have got varying sizes. I've got a good 4x6 one that have decent sized drawers you can fit a lot of small pieces into. But they're quite good for things like that.
I think you one at the back there.
I've got a rather specific question, possibly. You mentioned different light sources being harmful. In terms of cabinet lighting, do you have any idea of what's better than others? Is halogen lighting safe? Is LED lighting safe?
I think a lot of people use LED lighting. I don't know if you have any.
I've not used lighting myself, but I think the general consensus is LEDs are a bit less, they're a bit softer on the figure itself. I know because if you put it right next to a halogen light, it's going to damage it potentially. But
I've seen a lot of people with very impressive displays where they've got like LED strips, and it does look really good.
Probably wrap this up, just saying.
How are we doing?
We're getting there, but we've been going for a while.
Okay.
Maybe just answer the question.
Couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
I've got one. It's about weight in general, but I've got a couple of figures, and I've been unlucky with two figures. One is the Haruhi Fujimiya figure with a couple of guitar, and where the weight is where a lot of her weight of the whole figure is. what do I do about those sort of breaks where the break is on a part where there's a lot of load being that can be
my opinion is you probably have to reinforce that, so it's probably going to take more than just gluing it, perhaps add a bit of metal pinning into it. Again, any sort of...
Yeah, I'd probably suggest reinforcing is the best thing. That's going to take a bit more delicate work, so you're going to have to drill a small hole into where the breakage is on both sides, get the little metal pin in there and then glue it together, because that, what happens then is the metal bit will take the weight of the figure rather than the actual breakage point. So that will take a lot of the load off.
Okay, thank you.
There was one more here, that one at the back.
Will there ever be a cabinet better than IKEA's Dettol?
No. 40 quid? Get in.
I mean, I'd say it depends what
It
you
does,
want,
yeah, it
for
does,
what
yeah.
you want to look at, whether you prefer sort of open display or whether you want something closed like the Deltop. But yeah, it sort of depends how you want your collection to look. It is a very cheap budget option, but there are more expensive things.
More money to spend on figures.
Yeah.
Right, so
Hey,
I'll just thank you very much for coming. Well, judging by that response, we might have to do another one. Right now! No. If any of you have got nothing to do now, Ebby and I, with a couple of our friends, are going to be doing the YouTube panel in another room. It's just like next door, isn't it?
Next door.
So if you fancy coming along to that, we're going to show some videos of us being prats. Head over there, we'll see you in a bit. Have a great convention.
I got very